my god! Ah! Hello. What are you eating? What is going on?
Hello everyone and welcome to the very first episode of Mellowing with Melo. I'm your host, Melodite63. For those of you that don't know me, I am a horror story narrator of ghost, monster stories, and also some true crime stories. I mostly focus on serial killers, but every so often I do dabble in true crime. So today's episode is going to be about how to get into the haunt industry and what my experience looked like, so that way you're able to kind of gain some little more insight. So, just a forewarning, I'm going to be very blunt and very brutally honest with my own experience, and it's probably going to actually ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to try to make it not overly negative. I'm just going to base it on like matter of fact, this is what I experienced, and just go from there. So, all right, well, first of all, I wanted to wish a happy early Halloween. It is October 1st as of I'm recording this. So to all my haunt actors who are above and beyond and abroad, I wish you guys happy haunting for the month of October, and please stay safe. And yeah, okay. So if you're listening to this video and maybe you're about to walk through a haunted house and you're like, you know what, I wonder what it's like to be an actor. Well, hopefully this video answers some of your questions, and also maybe it can give you some insight to the experience of a haunt actor. So, I started in the haunted house industry about 5 years ago. I left it permanently just about almost 2 years ago now. This will be the second year that I'll be out of the industry. So I joined the specific haunted house that I will be talking about, and that was in the intro video. I started there in 2019 and I left in 2023. Yeah, 2023. Jeez, I'm bad at math. Okay, so the thing is I'm going to talk about my personal experience later, but I'm going to talk about how you yourself can get into a haunted house, and how do auditions look like, if there are auditions, and yeah. So anyways, let's start off with, like I said, you want to become a scare actor. So, first and foremost, find a haunted house. It's going to be really up to you, your decision on what type of haunted house you want to work for. Either you want to work for your local radio station that maybe threw up a haunted house in a few days or in a week or whatever, and it's only open for Halloween, or maybe it's open for a couple of days before Halloween and then including Halloween, whatever, or you went for the big professional haunted house in your city. So, depending on the haunted house you go to, your experience is going to differ, and it's just going to be two completely different experiences. So, like I said, first of all, find out if your city has a haunted house at all. And then second of all, check to see what the commitment level is going to be. So is this a haunted house that requires you only to be there for a few nights, few hours, or is it just Halloween? So, or is this a haunted house like mine that was open from the end of September until the beginning of November? You're hearing that right. We went from usually anywhere between September 26th to the 28th until November between November 3rd and November 5th. Yes, I know it's after Halloween, but usually we had 3 shows after Halloween called our Lights Out show. Basically, customers would go in and they would only be given a glow stick and all the lights would be turned off. So yeah, it definitely makes for a scarier and intense experience for the customers, but at that point you're already done with haunting. It's already kind of lost its fling. You're tired, you're exhausted, you've been doing it for well over a month and you're just done. You're like, I want to go home. I'm done acting. It's lost its flair. So yeah, that definitely will happen. You will get very fatigued very quickly. So, okay. Well, you want to go work a professional haunted house for the first time for your first ever experience. Great. So, first of all, usually most professional haunted houses have auditions. How do auditions work? Well, so one of the most pivotal skills that a haunt actor has is their improvisation skills. So, that's really is what is going to make you stand out between you and other people that will be auditioning, is your skills and your intuition of basically taking a character that should be fiction into reality. So what you should be practicing before you go to auditions is basically focus on, just to give an example, one of the things or tasks that they had us do in my auditions is they would be like, okay, you're digging a grave, dig this grave, show what you got. Well, you might be thinking, oh, well, that's really easy. Maybe not, because the thing is you need to add as much detail to that as possible. So basically make it look as realistic as possible. So pretend you're holding a shovel, obviously, but what if the earth that you're digging into is a little tougher to break ground in? Maybe you might need to kick that shovel in. So, huck your shovel into the ground and then put your foot on top of that shovel and then push it down. And then every so often, make sure, you're adding a little subtle details like, maybe wiping sweat off of your eyebrows. It's little details like that, because like I just said, you're taking something that should be fiction into reality. That is what's going to make you stand out between you and some other actors that may be auditioning. The other thing is show energy. Don't be shy. Being shy is the last thing you want to do in auditions. So it's not a bad thing, but it's also not, it doesn't look great if you're kind of not really putting 100% into whatever it is that they're asking you to do. So another thing that you should be focusing on is also learn how to be scary with your body before you hop into anything that involves giving a monologue or a speech, because I'm going to be honest with you, half the things that you think are scary probably aren't, and I'm just being blunt. It's surprisingly a lot harder to have a speaking role at a haunted house than it is to be scary with your body, because the thing you need to think about is the things that you're saying to yourself in the mirror, preparing for this role or whatever that you're trying to prep to do. You need to remember that people are going to talk back at you. So what are you going to say back to that stuff? In a very chaotic environment, chances are you're not going to know what to say until you get a little more experience. So first of all, like I said, learn to become scary with your body. So whether if that's you're a contortionist and you're able to like twist your limbs and Maybe you're able to do a full 360 of your head. I don't know. um, but learn on how to be creepy and scary with your body. Learn how to posture. Learn how to maybe give a really good smile. Hell, even if you have good voice acting skills, show that off. Auditions are for you to show the best part of yourself in the sense of haunt acting. So, yeah. One of the hardest things you're probably going to be asked to do, and I'm going to be honest with you, everyone kind of flunks at this at first, being a zombie. You think it's easy, but it's not. One of the Hollywood cliches that everyone likes to do is they like to drag their foot around. Don't drag your foot. I don't know how to explain it, because the thing is like my zombie, I've literally perfected over years. So I'm not about to embarrass myself and show myself on camera doing a zombie. But again, like zombie, that's where posturing comes in. That's where if you have a really good skill of being able to actually contort your body in some weird and disgusting way, maybe you're able to make some weird vocalizations that really, really sell it. So yeah, again, like, that's what haunt managers are usually looking for in auditions is, your improvisation skills, and then your attention to detail, and also how well you follow instructions. If you have an actor that's coming in for auditions and you say, hey, I want you to be a possessed priest, and then they for some reason go, you know what, I don't like that, I'm going to be a psychopathic serial killer for this, they're going to like that, because the thing is like come haunt time and they're getting ready for opening night and you're doing your own thing, they can't be having that. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into basically what training is going to look like after auditions. So I'm going to be honest with you, auditions are the simpler part of this process. So just to kind of reiterate so we can move on, just work on your improvisation skills, work on becoming scary with your body before your speaking skills, and then go from there. So for me personally, training kind of worked in a month-long schedule. Back when I started in 2019, they only had, I think, like close to 7 to 10 training days. And then years before that, it used to be even shorter, but that's also because they had a smaller cast. And so they're just, there wasn't, like, there just wasn't much to do. So 2019 was also the first year that the haunted house started paying the actors. I'm happy that I joined that year because if anything, I don't think I would have been able to do it because I was almost ready to give myself a full month of not making any money doing that. But at the same time, I would have, and I still would have, years going on from that point. So, training probably won't be paid. For us, we were only paid, I think, for like 8 or 10 hours of the training. Here's the thing. Training is where they really start to fine tune who's going to be casted where. So on auditions, they usually try to start casting, based on your body size. And that's another thing about auditions. Auditions, they look for your body size as well. So if you're a big burly dude, they may or may not have a costume for you. Or you could be competing with 4 or 5 other burly dudes who also came in for auditions. And so typically, it's not just your acting skill they're looking for. They could also be literally casting you just based on your body size as well. So yeah, in training, like I said, they really, really focus in on casting and trying to figure out where they're going to put you And yeah, so basically, the way training worked for me was, as the years went by, so like 2021, 2022, 2023, they were pretty long and extensive. It lasted almost a month before the haunt actually started. And there was a certain point of time where we weren't even being paid for it. And to be honest with you, like, depending on what type of commitment you were giving to the haunt, whether if it was part-time or full-time, my managers had a thing for kind of almost hanging an apple in front of your face. One of the managers I quoted as saying, the more training shifts you show up, the better that we can cast you, aka the better your role will be. At least that's the way that I interpreted that. So that's going to be my other piece of advice is, don't fall into that trap. Don't fall into the trap of committing yourself to the full training schedule, committing yourself to a full-time schedule just so you can get a better role. However, though, where that does turn into a catch-22 is you'll sometimes hear haunt managers say there's no such thing as a bad role. That is bullshit. There is 100% a bad role. Every haunted house has one. There's that one role where it's super physically demanding, mentally stressful, physically straining, whatever. There is 100% such thing as a bad role. So do not let your managers tell you that. Now, I'm only bringing this up because it happened to me, and it happened to many of my other friends who are still currently employed at this haunted house. Contracts. When you're reading these contracts, be careful. Read carefully, and make sure you're reading up on them. And had if I actually read my contracts, I personally don't believe that I would have worked for this haunted house, because some of the clauses were pretty ridiculous. There was one where if you quit, you couldn't come back for a full year. There's another one where it was like you couldn't go work for another haunted house the following year, and that was mostly just to protect the haunt from having you going around to every haunted house and spilling the beans on the production of the haunted house that you just worked at. I do feel that one is a little ridiculous. But again, I mean, if that's the type of competitiveness that this haunted house wanted to have, then so be it. Another one was this one wasn't ridiculous. It's just this is just from what I remember. You weren't allowed to, basically, like, if you saw someone on the haunted house Facebook page like giving a bad review, you weren't allowed to respond to them. That's pretty standard for a lot of jobs you'll ever have in your life, so I'm not going to really say that, like, that's ridiculous. But if I remember correctly, there was even one where it was like you couldn't say, oh, I work at so and so haunted house on your Facebook profile and then start posting a bunch of political opinions. I feel I understand it's about image, and you don't want to have an actor going around going, oh, like, I think so and so on Donald Trump, I think so and so on Joe Biden. I get that. You don't want that to happen. But at the same time, just, I'm not too sure how to word this without, like, I'm not trying to come across as, I guess, a drama queen, so to speak, So, anywho, so, like I said, if you are signing contract or anything like that, please read them and be careful on what that is that you're signing. Small editor's note, also one of the clauses is we weren't allowed to take pictures of our costumes or of our scenes. But apparently that has now changed, or at least that's the perception. Especially if you're one of the favorites of the managers, I guess you're just allowed to do whatever the hell you want to do now these days, apparently. But one of the female actors that I used to work with has consistently taken pictures of herself in the haunt in a hallway. I mean, it's not really that of a how am I trying to word this? It's not that outgiving, like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's not that, there's really no details being expunged at that point. But if any other actor would have done that, they would have been fired. Okay, so moving on. Now you may have more questions about casting. So I'm just trying to think of like some general questions that I have. So one thing that my haunted house was really great at was sometimes not telling you what your role was until very late into training, like almost until opening night. Again, like that kind of depends on what type of commitment you're giving to them. So if you're just doing part-time, you're kind of low on the priority list. So sometimes you might not even see a costume, much less your role, until sometimes opening night. For me personally, that really stressed me out. It really, really sucked. And honestly, like, I can't really see in how that is much better for the costuming department. Cause you know, just whatever. So, another thing is, the other thing about, casting as well is just, I've already said this, but don't give full-time commitment just because you think you're going to get a better role. Something that you do learn through experience, especially after your first year, is like, okay, if I want the better roles, then I need to give different commitment. Something that I've noticed is sometimes it just doesn't matter. Sometimes you're going to get a really good role no matter what your commitment is. And sometimes you're also going to get some really extremely crappy roles just because you drew the shorter stick. That's plain and simple. So, yeah, my personal experience with casting has been, it went from like really cool and good to like to the point where like typically you just learn to kind of accept the bad roles, and you kind of just learn to accept like the decision making, and you kind of just roll with the punches, especially if you're still pretty green and to your haunt. And yeah, so, but however, though, near the end, I definitely started questioning some of the casting decisions, because it kind of seemed like they were just pushing for new actors in some pretty intense roles who had no experience doing said roles, and just kind of crossing their fingers that they could last doing these roles. So that's something I'm also going to talk about, and this is something that hopefully your managers will talk about in your training periods, is levels of your scare and and securing the longevity of your scare. So, as you all mostly know, when you go into your normal day job, you don't go 110% from the minute that you're there and till the time you leave. You're going to be really gassed out, really exhausted. Haunt acting is kind of the same thing. So what you want to learn about your roles very quickly, I recommend, is you find a way to make sure that you're not just overdoing it, and that you're able to find a manageable level to keep your scare going. So for example, you're a zombie. put yourself on a spectrum of 1 to 7. 1 being alive, 7 being a complete, full, dead zombie, right? Well, can you do a full level 7 zombie for a month and a half? There's a lot of actors that I worked with who primary source of income was the haunted house. They didn't have a second job. I did. So I needed to think about how much energy I was actually really putting into my roles, and I wasn't, putting myself in harm's way. But you always end up doing it, especially if you're really just trying to overwork yourself and you kind of just accept it. And at the same time, like, this was also just the expectation set by the haunt. Like they frequently said, don't hurt yourself, yada, yada, yada. But there comes a point in time where you will hurt yourself and you kind of just have to accept the hurt. And then that's when, pain medication comes into the topic. Making sure that you're sleeping enough, you're eating before shifts and stuff like that. Yeah, so anyways, I'm getting a little off topic here. So yeah, casting is a pretty interesting beast. Just my best advice is roll with the punches, especially if you're being a new actor. Just roll with it. And at the same time, like, don't just give full-time commitment because you think it might get you a better role, So, okay. Like I said, back to that conversation about levels. You're finally in your scene. It's beginning of haunt night and you just went full out and you're dead in the water, tired. What do? How do you manage it? So, to be honest with you, I don't have any good advice on that. A lot of people say tea, a lot of people say water, a lot of people also just depend on energy drinks. I did. Something that you should also, like I said, focus on is making sure, like, that your work is not conflicting. So if you're working a 9 to 5, okay, fine. But at the same time, like, just be careful. So if there's any questions you guys have for me or any comments from other scare actors where you want to leave some advice down in the comments, please do. It's that time of the year, and maybe there's some new scare actors watching this video going, oh man, okay, I've never thought about this before. Or maybe I'm not covering something that you guys think that I should be covering. Please leave it down in the comments. So anyways, we're now going to get into my personal experience and how I would have done things differently, and hopefully there's some takeaways from it. Okay, so the full story of my experience at the haunt. So I became a full-out scare actor in 2019. I was pretty green. I was very new. At this time, being a haunt actor at this specific haunted house was a very exclusive thing to be doing. It was one of the biggest haunted houses in the city. It still is. And it's, like I said, it was a pretty cliquey group and very exclusive to be a part of it. And so I'm sorry if you guys hear that. That is my cat. She's just trying to beg for attention at this moment. So my first year, you guys saw it in my intro video. My character was called the Glutton. I will put that picture. My picture actually will be the thumbnail. So that was my first ever costume. That was my first ever role. Basically, the role was pretty simple. I sat at a dinner table and ate out of a dead fat guy. There was an idea eventually that I was going to be eating oatmeal, but I don't think they came to an agreement of what I was going to actually be eating. That, and they also didn't want to make the mask dirty, because these silicone masks can run anywhere between $800 to $1,000. They're very expensive, high quality silicone masks. So, like I said, that was my first role. This was also the third to last year at this specific location. So the way this haunted house worked was they would often lease out buildings, and then just throughout a multiple course of years they would build the haunt. They would expand it, or they would just build on top of it. So for example, when they first started, they were in a abandoned warehouse kind of just by a local college in the downtown portion of our city. And then they moved to a theater for a couple of years. And then they finally moved to this location, to another abandoned warehouse further away from where they initially were. And that's where they were for probably around 3 or 4 years. And then finally they they're now settled in another abandoned warehouse, but it was an old newspaper factory. So it's a much bigger location, and it's also much, much bigger production than what it was in that old location. So yeah. So because of my inexperience of haunt acting, my go-to method my first year was to method act. So every time I put on that mask and I sat in that dining room, I was this gluttonous asshole, slurping down food and just being a glutton. And so because of my mistake of method acting, sometimes it was really hard to turn that off. And this is where you'll start to figure out that haunt acting is quite stressful, and it is pretty mentally taxing. So here we go, starting to get a little negative now. If you want to leave the video, this is where you can leave. But if you want to hear the juicy tea, please stay to continue. So one particular night, this was literally maybe a week and a half in, and my dad texted me that night, and he goes, "Hey buddy, mashed potatoes, pork chops at home for dinner." I go, "Oh hell yeah," So I finished my shift, go home. It's probably 1 a.m, and I microwaved the pork chops and mashed potatoes, and I started eating. Going on for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that I got mashed potatoes all over my face. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? So I go and I grab a napkin and I wipe it off. And then again, this time I'm noticing that I'm getting more bits and pieces all over my face. And then I realize I was eating my mashed potatoes and pork chops with my hands. Didn't even grab cutlery. That scared the shit out of me. And like I said, that was just because I made the mistake of not leaving the haunt at the haunt. And that's something that you may or may not struggle with, is leaving your character at the haunt, especially if you're doing it full time and for the length that you're doing it as. You'll notice that you'll do certain things in your day-to-day life, or you'll even start having dreams. That is a very common thing. It gets intense sometimes. I have full respect for people that are able to just not do that, but I'm just not one of those people, and it took me 4 years to learn that it's something that wasn't going to change. And I thought that if I push myself, it would. So, anyway, moving forward, a few days later, I ended up throwing in the towel and I quit. I couldn't handle the stress, and it was a much more intense job than I anticipated. At this time, I was also dating a girl. We decided to do the haunt together because we both had a passion for horror and we thought it'd be really fun. She was an actual stage actor. I had no acting experience walking in. So, like I said, we did it together. And then I decided to not do it 2020. Just because of distance, and at the same time I quit the year before, so I didn't really want to just walk back in, and I felt like I was shooting myself in the foot if I walked back into those auditions and knowing that I quit the year before. So 2021 rolls around, and me and my now ex-girlfriend at the time, we broke up, and in 2021 she had some issues working together with me, and we weren't really going to be working together anyway, but just being in the same environment, she approached management, and then management decided to basically, the way that I interpreted it and the way that it felt to me was basically they favored her and they alienated me. I have no idea why. I don't really know what led to that decision. Maybe it was because I did quit in 2019. I'm completely uncertain. I don't know. But, yeah, anyways. So from that point on, I started garnering this reputation of being a troublesome actor, quote for quote. So you're probably starting to figure out already that like a lot of this experience was induced by myself. It was, but at the same time, management wasn't they weren't helpful in a lot of cases, in a lot of circumstances. And I'm willing to really sit here and say that because there also was a subculture there where if you kind of complained about something, or if you were like, oh, I don't like this role, you instantly were labeled as troublesome, and it was kind of, you're made to feel like you're a burden. Some actors got it worse than others. Sorry for cracking my knuckles in the mic. So like I said, like some actors got it worse than others, and like I said, there is a subculture, like kind of steeped in stigma a little bit to like not complain. So anyway, 2021 happens, and that year I was just a zombie. I was working out in a shack, and this is going to lead me in my next topic, and this is about actor safety. I'm going to be honest with you, the haunt that I worked at has a pretty severe issue with actor safety and kind of guaranteeing it. They consistently say, oh yeah, we're going to hire security companies, but we're almost pretty certain that the haunt is then going to these security companies and then going, okay, like we actually don't want you interjecting unless if like we specifically ask you to, or whatever it is, because that's how security companies work here in Canada, at least, is when you hire a security company, you basically tell them like what they can and can't do, and so they have to follow that. I'm pretty convinced, and some of us were pretty convinced, that they were told to not engage unless if like it was absolutely necessary. And there's a lot of scenarios where something would happen to an actor right in front of a security guard, and security would not do a single thing. That's not a security issue. That's 100%, in my opinion. I think it's because the haunt has directed security to not do anything nor say anything. So, the the haunt that I worked for had security even in 2019, but as the production grew in 2021 and 2020 was the first time they had 2 individual haunts, and it was the same thing in 2021 and 2022. So to further the topic of actor safety, during my time in the 4 years that I haunt acted, there were several times where I was sexually harassed. I was physically assaulted. Most of my friends were physically assaulted. Some of them were even borderline sexually assaulted. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. So one specific story that I do have is my ex-girlfriend at the time popped out from doing a scare, and some guy stood in front of her, grabbed her mask, and then shook it on her head and then walk away. One of my haunt managers had a story where she was in a straitjacket, shackled to a wall, and some guy came up to her and grasped her breasts. Another story that I have is especially people would have their actors would have their butts pinched. Like I said, because of social media right now and the sexualization of horror characters right now, it's kind of a shitty time to be a scare actor because of all that happening. And it's mostly from women, honestly. You're gonna get a lot of really sexually advansive comments from women. And men typically act more macho than anything. That's something you'll figure out very quickly. And yeah, so I have a lot of stories. Maybe that's for another episode, one day, or maybe if someone wants me to actually delve in on some pretty longevity stories that I have about actor safety and my safety being put in jeopardy. Christ, even so in 2022 I ended up being casted as Frankenstein. I was told by one of the managers it was because of my work in 2021 and of how well I performed in there. No, that's false. What actually happened is the guy who they casted, who they wanted to be Frankenstein, the mask didn't fit him, nor do I think he was mobile enough to do that role. Because when I started doing it, I got gassed out after about 4 weeks of doing it, because I had an Igor with me, who's still one of my closest and best friends. They took him away after 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, this works like clockwork. I'm telling you right now, after 2 weeks, actors drop like flies, whether if it's because of illness, whether because the schedule is too demanding, or they just couldn't handle the stress. That's just one of the disadvantages of running a haunt for that long, to be honest with you. But anyways, there's reasons why they run it for so long, and I'm not going to really get into that. One story that I have from working Frankenstein, my friend Igor, he was crowd controlling a group of about 4 or 6 teenage dudes. And I'm coming around the corner from crowd controlling another group, pushing them down the tunnel towards Pennywise. Yeah, I work next towards Pennywise. That was really fun, having casual conversations with Pennywise. Anyways, I walk around the corner, and then I see all these guys posturing on Igor. Then as soon as they saw 6'2", 250 pounds of me, they dropped that act quickly. And then all of a sudden, after they left, I kind of went to Igor and I'm like, can you imagine what would have happened to you if I wasn't here? And that's just really crazy to think, and something really scary to try to grasp, and he was a male, so. And the other thing is there's a lot of females playing male roles too. So like this is where I say like you probably will get sexually assaulted, because sometimes it's like people will think that you're the opposite gender, and so they'll touch you provocatively thinking you're the opposite gender. So yeah, that's gonna happen to you. It's not if, or it's when. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna be blunt about that. So one of the main reasons why I quit is because I actually have a permanent minor injury from it. I'm not going to say disability, because disability is very extreme. I have a permanent minor injury from it. I have peroneal tendonitis. Because in 2023, I was yet another zombie, and we built a tree maze outside. So at this point, the production grew quite larger, and we had 3 haunts. And actually, if I like, this might be wrong, but I do remember the upstairs haunt being shut down by the city because an inspector came in and like found that the handrails were unsafe. And then my haunt, being the haunt it is, they didn't tell customers that bought their tickets already that only 2 of the 3 haunts were going to be operational. And I have no idea if people were refunded or not, but that is something that did happen in 2023. And there was a lot of hiccups that year. Like I said, that was the first year in that location, so there was ought to be hiccups. There was ought to be a lot of stress as well from management. So yeah. So other than me running around in that tree maze and twisting my ankle every second to 3 scares, and my manager was like, well, hey, like there's no reason to be running out here. Well, to be honest with you, the only way that I could manage that scene, especially when actors started dropping out, is you had to run, and or either move quickly. And yeah, I twisted my ankle several times, and it came to the point where I had to quit because of an ankle injury. And then so now leading into why I left the industry entirely. That same year, 2023, I started developing some weird nerve pains in my thighs. They still do affect me every now and then. That's a whole separate issue that's not related to the haunt. I asked for a role change around dress rehearsals, so I understand like this would have pissed off a lot of haunt managers. And I'm just being brutally honest here. Like I know what I did was messed up. It was kind of messed up, but at the same time, like at least it was accommodated. But not without one of the managers basically very much displaying his anger with that. And he basically told me, because I asked for a role change the year prior, so when I was Frankenstein, that because of that, they had no idea what to do with me as an actor. And so they had no idea what to do with me as an actor. I'm sorry, my cat just is like, she's trying so hard for attention right now. They had no idea what to do with me. And that really shaped my confidence. one of the hallmarks of how you know you're getting good at haunt acting is when you're scaring your other cohorts. And I was doing that for about 2 years. I was like 2 years successfully scaring other scare actors. And that's how you know like what you're doing is very good. And that's, so anyway, like, but then have him to kind of come around and then say, well, we had no idea what to do with you. So like, here's this role. And he was very intense with me with how he worded things. And I tried talking to one of the main head actor, like managers, like basically about like some of the things that were happening. And I don't know. I don't really remember the conversation very well, but I just remember saying like, hey, listen, like there's a lot going on right now. And then of course, weeks in, I had a pretty bad breakup, and I ended up living on my own for a while. And so that definitely led to another stressor. And yeah, it's really funny. Like I said this to my therapist last month, but it always, ever since 2019, like ever since I joined this haunted house, my life just seems to just something bad happens. Like last year, for example, I got fired from a job for mistakes that actually weren't even my fault. Like it was pretty ridiculous why I got fired. And I'm not really trying to play a victim here. Like I'm just naming things out as they happened. So yeah, like I said, so anyway, before I lose context and topic, like, just so September, October of like ever since 2019, my life has like literally just seemed to fallen apart, and there's significant stresses that happen, and like some really bad things just seem to happen between September and October. Like, I mean, Christ, even in 2022, we had a guy die. Yeah, like one of the actors literally died. We don't know how he died, but all that we know is he died. And a lot of people were not pretty happy with how they dealt with his death. It felt pretty disingenuous, but at the same time, like it was one of those situations where it was just like, just kind of shut up. And that's just how society is, like, so there's a whole story behind that. But that's also not my story to tell, because that one more or less affected another one of my closer friends more than it ever affected me. And so, yeah, anyways. So yeah, I left the Honda industry mostly because of management, and also because of this permanent injury that I now have. And to be honest with you, like every time that I talk about this haunted house, I get really stressed out. I don't like saying triggered. I just get really affected, and I start really thinking of all the negative moments and times that I had there. And I get told that the manager that, dealt with my situation back in 2023 is gone now. And it's like, maybe you should come back now. And it's like, no, there's so many other things fundamentally wrong with that haunted house. Like, for example, this haunted house also really doesn't like it when you talk about things and when you speak out about things. So, I honestly, there's a reason why I'm never going back to that haunt. If I ever do get the haunt bug again and I want to scare act, I'm going somewhere else. And that, or just maybe I don't know. So, now you might be asking, whoa, okay, like that's some intense experiences you have, my dude. Like maybe haunt acting isn't worth it. You know what? At the end of the day, I probably have some of the strongest friendships in the world from working at the haunt industry. Are most of them trauma bonded? Abso-freaking-lutely. But you know what? Hey, it is what it is, and that's just what the haunt industry is. So yeah. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, that'll be the episode for today. If you have any comments or any questions, feel free to ask. If there's any scare actors that are watching this video and want to drop their own advice, please do down in the comments. And yeah, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also, yet another podcast is being released with my friend Marvel DC fan today at 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to watch yet another podcast, feel free. And yeah, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, have a great day and make sure to stay mellow.